And next up is Cathy McMillan from Dyslexia BC. Good afternoon, Cathy. You have 5 minutes to make presentation to us, and we have 5 minutes set aside to ask questions or make comments, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Great. Thanks for having me. Nice to see some of you again, Ben and Henry. Don't recognize anyone else, but anyway. Is it not on?
I wasn't sure if you were allowed to be in the background. I hadn't had your permission. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Last week, Dyslexia Canada, maybe? Yeah, I'm not part of them. Yeah. Anyways, my name's Cathy McMillan, and I am dyslexic. Undiagnosed, of course. The difference between how I approach reading and writing is vastly different from my two adult dyslexic children that have been diagnosed and supported properly. I procrastinate. And this week, while writing my presentation, I got a little distracted with a social media post that I saw on May 25th. A quote from the post reads, "We're seeing an increasing number of people who experience brain injury after they survive an overdose as the drug supply becomes more toxic," said Jennifer Whiteside, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. "People living with brain injuries require a specialized approach to care that meets their unique needs. The work being done by the Cognitive Assessment and Rehabilitation for Substance Use Program is critical in ensuring more British Columbians can get the help they need and deserve." Yet dyslexic individuals get no support or funding for remediation within schools or anywhere else for that matter. It just doesn't make sense. BC needs legislation and policy to support dyslexia and other learning disabilities in K-12, post-secondary, and the workplace. Programs and policy need to be initiated in the Ministries of Education, Health, and Ministry of Child and Family Development. It's time to be proactive. 80%, and I'm going to say it again, 80% of our homeless youth have dyslexia. And our incarceration systems are riddled with illiterate and dyslexic individuals. Dyslexics are prone to addictions, unemployment, underemployment, suicidal idealization. Amanda Todd had an LD, and mental health issues, especially if they are not supported. Dyslexia BC said last year at our 2023 budget presentation, and we are going to say it again, BC does not have a school anywhere in the entire province that provides an education equitably to dyslexic individuals, even the private schools. Of course, they're private, right? So today, Dyslexia BC is requesting targeted specific funding for legislation and mandatory dyslexia screening using evidence-based screeners starting in kindergarten. In the US, this is happening in every state. Only one state in the entire USA does not have a law that requires them to screen for dyslexia in kindergarten. Legislation and policy from the ministry to switch from balanced literacy to structured literacy. Legislation and policy for teacher training for mandatory remediation programs which can be accessed by both general and special education populations. Dyslexia BC just met last year with the Honourable Mitzi Dean and the Honourable Rashna Singh and requested the exact same things. In fact, we have met with the last 3 education ministers and requested the exact same things. We haven't seen any change. We also told them that the BCC PAC and the BCSTA just recently voted to advocate to several ministries on the exact same things. In addition, we asked them to reverse the 2019 arbitration decision. If you don't know what that is, I strongly encourage you to look it up. It's time for change to provide equitable access for all students, including the dyslexic ones. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Henry, then Ronna Ray.
Hi, thank you so much, Cathy, and bear with my lack of awareness. Can you educate us a bit more? What's the difference between balanced literacy versus structured literacy?
Okay, well, I think last year I mentioned...
I think I asked the same question after that.
Balanced literacy, in my view, is the hippie version of trying to teach kids to read. I have a science background. I do have a BSc from the University of Victoria, which I squeaked through with my writing skills and did awesome in math and statistics. Balanced literacy formed in the 60s, and it basically is the idea: surround the kids with literacy, read to them, show them how much you love reading, and they'll get it. To me, that's learning by osmosis. Structured literacy is based in science. Basically, they've done cognitive studies, they've done, teaching, see what lights up in the brain, like hooked people up to machines while they're teaching them to read. And the science shows that you have to explicitly teach reading so that the skills are learned rather than just memorizing or being exposed to reading. The kids have to be explicitly, systematically structured literacy. That's what it is.
Ronna Ray.
I haven't been on this committee for a while. You did mention a 2019 arbitration decision. Could you please expand on that and
Sure. The 2019 arbitration decision was between the BCTF and the government, and it was about class composition. And so they decided they were going to go through the special needs categories and try to figure out which ones they wanted less IEPs or kids with disabilities in each classroom. So the Q category is what represents learning disabilities. 80 to 90% of all learning disabilities is dyslexia. So they decided they were going to go through the G category, which is autism, and Q, which is dyslexia. G, they didn't really change it that much, but Q, they decided that they were going to weed through it and take out some of the kids in the Q category so that they wouldn't be designated with the ministry, which means that they don't get IEPs and they don't get remediation. So I do know of some districts, I get anonymous mails, I do know of some districts that hired retired teachers and literally went through without telling parents and decided which kids to get rid of. And basically those kids would be not designated with the ministry as a child with special needs and not get help.
And so what was the arbitration?
The government actually decided for the districts to go through that Q designation and split it and end it and only have a few kids left. I'll send you the document.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Okay. Ben.
Cathy, that was very informative, but I want to ask you about, you mentioned the statistic 80% of the homeless have dyslexia?
Not homeless, street youth.
Oh, street youth.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the kids that drop out of school and end up being on the streets.
Where is that number from?
A study that Linda Siegel did, that's the number that's the one I kind of referenced. She did it in Toronto, but I'm sure it's the same in Vancouver. I think it was the 90s, but I could get you
It's
the
a very
study.
disturbing percentage.
It is. Yeah. Well, these kids, they don't do well at school, they can't read, and they end up on the streets, and there's your addiction. So as a dyslexic myself, with a loving family, and my daughter who has severe dyslexia, if she was born into any other family, like the amount of money we have had to pay to get her to university is ridiculous. And it doesn't end. They become dyslexic adults. So she gets to college and she finds new problems there. She's gotten jobs. She's found problems there as well. So we need to look at learning disabilities differently and ensure that they get equitable access. It's invisible. I mean, you can't tell that I'm dyslexic until you see me stumbling when I'm reading. But, and something I've read a billion times before I come here, right? So, it's invisible, but in a workplace, it can cause huge mental health problems when your colleagues don't understand why your paper takes 2 days longer than it should compared to everybody else.
Okay, that pretty much ends up our time. Kathy, thank you.
You can email me. I'm really easy to find online.
Oh, okay. So Kathy, thank you very much for your presentation this afternoon.
Okay.
Despite what you said about procrastinating at the beginning, it turned out very, very, very well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay.